Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Storytime. On today's stories, we once again return to the deep woods. We've got some brand new encounters today, stories about being lost in the woods, stories from out camping, and even some stories from cabins. Remember, this summer I have some amazing designs and merchandise, so if you'd like to check them out, then make sure you do so. I know you're going to love them. And lastly, if you haven't followed me on my social media, then make sure you're doing that as well. I have some extra things that I know you're going to enjoy. But other than that, let's grab those backpacks and let's go out into the woods, shall we? Number 1. This happened a couple of years ago in July. Me and some of my friends decided to go camping. Looking back on the experience, we never were able to explain it. So, for some background information, we live in a rural town in the middle of nowhere. We were looking to find a cabin in the mountains where we could take some time to write. Me and my friends were in a band. We thought as a great way to escape, we could look for a place to stay for the week. It seems like whenever you go into the wilderness, your creative ideas open a lot more. At least, that's how it was for us. Getting the idea to go into the wilderness was one thing. Finding the cabin was another thing. We spent a couple of days looking for the best deal. Honestly, we were trying our best to save as much money as we could. Finally, we found this cabin I mentioned, and we planned out our little vacation. On Saturday morning, with my friends Shauna and Lisa, we pack up our things in our car. Then we make this hour drive into the mountains. The drive there was pretty uneventful. It should have taken us about an hour to get there, but it almost took us 2. There was a lot of traffic about halfway through the drive, but once we reached the mountains, it opened up. Right away, you could tell just how lonely this place was. Going up the mountain, you were surrounded by woods on all sides. The trees were so tall here. The sunlight had a hard time making its way through. Something else we had noticed was we hadn't seen any other cars or even people. We did happen to see a few cabins, but for the most part, they looked pretty abandoned. Finally, after all the driving, we arrived to an opening in the woods. We were welcomed by a huge, beautiful field right beside a lake. Right next to it was where our cabin was located. It was perfect. It was like looking at a picture book. Little did we know what would be awaiting us there. We arrived, and the first thing we wanted to do was go for a swim in the lake. We opened the door to our cabin, and we began to get ready. It seems that as soon as we entered, though, we were met with this sudden cold air. Now, it was a nice warm 78 degrees outside. Right in that moment, it felt like the temperature went down at least 15 degrees. My friends blamed it on the air conditioning, but we noticed something was wrong with that assumption. For starters, the air conditioning was turned off. That couldn't be it. Also, the windows were closed, so it's not like there was a breeze making its way inside. Alright, well, already it seemed like things were starting off different, but that wasn't stopping us from enjoying our time. Once we had settled in, we head outside and go to the lake. We spent the majority of the afternoon swimming and talking, excited to get started on writing this week. After a fun day of excitement, we go back inside and get some rest. We were here to relax, but at the same time, we didn't want to get too distracted with our work. And so, we spent the next few days writing and practicing some new songs we were working on. For the most part, things were all right. I didn't notice the sounds of footsteps at night, but I just blamed this on my friends. I was thinking that they were walking around to get some water or something. Looking back, I should have paid more attention, because they were sound asleep in the beds that were next to me. Alright, well, now it's day number 5, and by this point, we had finally gotten a few songs written. It was great. Honestly, we were ahead of schedule right now. We decided to spend our final 2 days exploring the woods. We ended up getting some of our backpacks and walking down these small trails that led up further into the wilderness. We happened to get some great photos while out there, and while we were exploring, we stumbled upon these old abandoned cabins. There was a bunch of yellow tape across the surrounding area, but we ended up going anyways. we were pretty curious. The only thing we found that was bizarre were all these strange symbols and drawings that were drawn inside. Something about them made us pretty nervous. We honestly felt like we stumbled on something we weren't supposed to see. Still, I just blame this on people drawing things. I don't know why we didn't take any pictures of it, but we should have. While we were inside exploring this old cabin, we all heard the sound of a yell. That was followed by movement in the nearby woods. We all froze, looking at one another. Of course, the first thing we thought is that perhaps one of us had made a noise. As we whispered to one another, we once again heard the sound, only this time it was a lot farther. I'm not sure how I can describe it, but it sounded like a mix of a person and an animal at the same time, if that makes any sense. It was confusing to hear that. We had seen no signs of any other person, let alone an animal. Still, it was possible that there could have been some wolf or something. We had to be careful. Finally, when it seemed things settled down, we started our walk back to the cabin. The only difference this time is we were a lot more aware of our surroundings. Gone was the laughter and talking we just had a few minutes ago. Once we could see our cabin through the opening in the woods, we felt relieved. That relief only lasted a few seconds. Now we see a bunch of tracks around the cabin. We know these didn't belong to us. They looked like multiple footsteps, and from boots nonetheless. We tried to explain this away, but we ignored it. We spent that night inside making dinner and watching a movie on our laptop. At around 10 p.m. or so, we all heard the sounds of walking outside our cabin. These were loud footsteps. Clearly, whoever was outside wasn't trying to be quiet. That, or at least they were unaware of how much noise they were making. About 5 minutes later, the sounds had moved to the roof. Now it sounded like someone, or better yet, something was walking up there. I remember my friend Shauna saying it was a bear. Nice try, Shauna, but I don't think a bear could make its way up there. Me and Lisa nervously laughed. The sounds at this point had begun to fade. I remember I suddenly acted brave. I told them I would go outside and check. Yes, I know, not my smartest idea. Anyways, I grab my guitar and I go outside, ready to use it if I needed to. There were no noises, and there is no signs of anyone on the roof. I tell Shauna and Lisa to go outside, and I'm trying to prove to them that it was most likely the wind. It's when Shauna points something out in the distance that we end up running back inside. Ahead in the tree line, we can all see what look to be the shadows of people staring back at us. At first, I thought maybe it was just the branches. You can imagine with the lighting not being the best, it was hard to tell what it was. As we focused more, the shadows ended up moving. Now we heard the sounds of branches breaking. Right away, we run back inside, and we move as much furniture as we could to the door. We now turned off the lights and we closed the curtains. We sat there in the living room with our instruments, preparing for the worst. For the next half hour, we heard nothing but scratching and knocking at the doors. You can imagine that night we didn't sleep. Once the sun was up in the morning, we looked through the window, but we find nothing. We did see a bunch of marks on the doors and windows. Needless to say, we got out of there right away and never returned. Number 2. This strange encounter happened a few years ago when I was out in the Alabama wilderness. When I recall this story, I can't really find an answer for it. I think that's what makes it even more strange. Still, I figured I'd go ahead and tell you all about it. Together with my dog Karen, we decided on going camping out in the deep woods. I was actually on sort of a time limit, so to speak. You see, another reason I was able to remember this was because my cousin was graduating high school. I promised I'd be there for a special day. The ceremony was on a Thursday, and I set out on my adventure on a Monday. This gave me a few days to get some enjoyment out of my little vacation. So, together with Karen, I'd spent all Monday walking around and enjoying the sights. This was actually my first time out on my own, and also the first time I had brought Karen. I could tell she was really happy to be there with me. She was always just so full of energy. Finally, after an entire day of walking around, we both looked like we could use a break. We ended up finding this natural opening that was underneath a tree. This is where we stayed for the night. The warmest it had gotten in the afternoon was 75 degrees, but now at around 8 p.m., it was about 60. The forecast said it was going to be about 54 degrees, so not too cold, but cold enough that we would need a fire. And so I grabbed some firewood and get a little campfire going. I was preparing some food for Karen and I, when all of a sudden I take one look at Karen. I now noticed as she stood up, staring into the woods. All of a sudden, she started growling like she had seen something. I told myself she had seen a squirrel or maybe some other small animal, and I left it at that. Eventually, she did settle down, but I did find the behavior a bit worrisome. Remember, we're out here in the middle of nowhere, and I haven't seen anyone at all. This was only the start of what would happen later on. Again, assuming it was nothing, I closed my eyes and I tried to get some sleep. I remember waking up at around 3 in the morning, and I could hear the sound of water. I slowly opened my eyes, and now I see it's raining. It wasn't too bad, but it was definitely noticeable since it woke me up. Karen was still fast asleep next to me. I grabbed some more firewood and put more into the fire, and after that I go back to sleep. In the morning I pack up my things, and me and Karen start making the walk back. On our way there, we wanted to stop by some old buildings and rock formations we had seen. This was our plan for day number 2. We walked for a couple of hours, and we found a road that seemed to go further down the woods. I hadn't seen this road on our way out there, but I figured we could follow it for a while. Who knows, maybe this way we could finally see people or maybe even a car. As we both started making our way down the road, I had started to notice just how old it was. You could tell its age because it looks like it hasn't been taken care of for years. You could see as the vegetation and trees were starting to take it back. It was now I took out my map and I see this road ended up stopping another couple of miles ahead of me. It didn't really seem like there was much else to see, so we start making our way back. Once we reached the crossroads we had encountered earlier, we continued back the way we had arrived. Yes, we did end up going to see those old buildings and cabins, but nothing too eventful. Karen did act up a few times, which caused me to worry. The reason why I was getting a little nervous was because at one point, I saw what looked like a shadow walking ahead of me. I yelled out thinking somebody else was in the woods, but they just ended up walking away. Disregarding that, we finally make it back to my car. Still, I wanted to stay out here one more night, so we camped inside. Once again, it had started to rain, so we ended up staying inside the car. Eventually the rain passed us and it was silent. Just about 15 minutes ago, you heard all this noise of the rain, but now strangely enough, it was silent. At this point, this was when the other noises had started. It first started with branches breaking and moving, and soon it was followed by the sound of people talking. This time, Karen started whining and crying. This really concerned me way more than the previous night. The sound stopped, and I tried to forget about it. This only lasted for a couple of minutes, because now I saw some lights in the trees. I take one look to the side, and now I see as 2 men in dark hoodies are making their way towards me. I freeze as I can now see them slowly walking over to me. Karen now starts barking a storm, but that didn't stop them. Obviously, my immediate reaction was to start the car, but guess what? I can't find my keys. Brilliant. I'm desperately trying to find them while I can hear them talking amongst themselves. I finally find the keys underneath my backpack, and when I look up, I'm met with these 2 staring right back at me. Both of them start hitting the side of the door, trying their best to open it. All the meanwhile, I have no idea what these 2 were doing out there. Finally, I get the car to start, and me and Karen get out of there. They try to catch up to me, but try as they did, my car was faster. I ended up stopping at a convenience store about half an hour away and I looked at my car. Poor thing, I was able to notice these dents and other marks they had made. I did make it back home, thankfully, and I was able to go to my cousin's graduation ceremony. Looking back, I wonder about something. All those noises I had heard in the woods and the shadows I had seen, was it possible that they'd been out there the entire time, only to act when they did? I'm not sure, but I was so happy Karen was there with me. If she hadn't tried to get my attention, who knows what would have happened. Number 3. This occurred just a week ago, and since then I've only told a few close friends. I figured why not share it with all of you as well. Set the scene, I'd returned home for winter break. I had a month off from school and really had nothing going on campus. My roommates were going to be gone as well, so there really was no point in me staying. I made the 5-hour drive back to my hometown, where I accompanied my mother. I hadn't seen her in almost a year, so this was definitely nice. One thing we both loved doing was running and camping. I'd been gone for so long, I'd forgotten just how much I'd missed doing this. It was one evening in January, and my mom was still at work. We were supposed to go running when she got home, but she told me she would be running late. Really, Mom? Well, if you have to stay later, I guess that's fine. I'll just go running on my own. I should be home at around 9. I'll bring you something to eat if you want. Just make sure to work up an appetite. Normally, I would advise anyone go running in the woods on their own, but I felt pretty comfortable there. Honestly, the worst thing that happened in town was somebody just taking things out of someone's car. You never really heard any stories of encounters with strangers. This was why I was so confident on going on my own, even if it was in the dark. The set of woods I was going to was actually a state park. In the mornings and during the daytime, you could expect to see plenty of people, but at night, it's an entirely different story. See, the park closes at 8 p.m., but that didn't stop me from going. Thankfully, I knew of another way in where I could walk down some back roads. When I get to the parking area, I noticed there were no other cars. It was obvious to me that everybody had gone home for the day. Now, remember how I said I was going to go for a run? Well, I sorta got lazy, and instead, I walked to this table and bench area. Here, you could get a perfect view of the stars above you, and you can even see the valley below. I walked about a quarter mile up this field, and I ended up reaching a bench. I now sat down as I take my iPod out. While I sat there listening to some music, I'd gotten this feeling like I wasn't alone. Concerned that somebody else might be here, I turn around and take a look towards the wooded area. There, I can see an older-looking individual staring right back at me. It was at this point I figured it was time to leave. Now I start making my way back down the field. Guess what happens next? Yes, of course, as you might imagine, he started to follow me. I didn't want to walk too fast because I didn't want him to make any sort of sudden movements. When I got to the back roads, I once again looked behind me. Not only was he still there, but now he had a friend with him. It was then I start hearing the footsteps getting louder. That laziness I had from earlier, well, it suddenly disappears, and I take off running down these lonely back roads. I seriously wish I didn't go this way. The lighting was just so bad. Once I was in a more populated area, I no longer saw them. Since then, I haven't been back to the park, but I did end up reporting it. Nothing as of yet, but I'll keep an eye on it for now. Number 4. Hello, everyone. This is something that happened to me many years ago. It's sorta long, but I promise you're going to enjoy it. Alright, here it goes. So, I remember that one day my friend told me about the set of woods he had gone to. He ended up going with some older cousins. I remember him recounting this story and telling me how there was this one area up in the mountains that was off limits, and he never knew why. All he thought was that it was somebody's private property and they wanted to be left alone. It's now been about 3 years since that took place. My buddy wanted to know if I wanted to go with him. For this story, we'll call my friend John. I was actually pretty interested. I'm always into having an adventure, and this sounded like the perfect excuse to go see something new. I forgot to mention, but we live in a town near the Rocky Mountains. John was the one driving us since I didn't know how to get there. Right away, as we started driving into this lonely area, I had a bad feeling. Normally, I didn't mind camping or going into the wilderness, but to me, this seemed to be too much. John reassured me everything was fine, and we would soon make it to a small opening right beside the woods. Another half hour of driving down these lonely back roads, and we reached this small little area with a couple of roads there. One road had a sign showing you how many miles to the next town. The other was unmarked. I guess this was the road we would be taking. John turns down this lonely road, and it's yet another 20 minutes of driving until we reach this small opening in the woods. By this point, the little bit of phone service we had was no longer working. Another thing was we had miscalculated how much time it would take us to arrive. It was now 5 p.m., and the sun was just starting to set. Now, our plan was to go camping, but I hadn't expected us to arrive this late in the evening. John told me we could set up our camp near the car. Then, we could go exploring tomorrow when there's more light. That night, I had this strange feeling like we weren't alone. I'm not sure why, but something felt weird. I just blamed this on reading way too many stories and soon forgot about it. After eating dinner and talking for a couple of hours, we go inside our tents and try to get some sleep. Somewhere at around 3 in the morning, I remember being awoken to the sounds of footsteps. This was then followed by seeing a shadow against my tent. If there was one nice thing about being out here, it was the moonlight and stars above us. It made it look like daytime. This was why I figured it was John who was outside making the noise. Perhaps he had gotten up to do something. Either way, I laid back down and I tried to get some sleep. The next morning, as we're making breakfast, I tell John I had heard footsteps and I'd seen him walking about. I'm sorry to tell you, but I was fast asleep last night. All that driving really made me tired. Are you sure you weren't just dreaming? Come on, John, knock it off. That wasn't you? Look, I'm being honest. I was in the tent, I promise you. He was always honest with me, so I did end up believing him. Still, that didn't stop me from becoming nervous. Just who exactly was out there then? If you thought that was alarming, it's not. It gets better. Well, at least not for us. After having breakfast, we grab our things and we put them in the back of the car on its bed. From there, we grab a couple of water bottles and we start making our way further into the woods. We only stop for about 10 minutes. That's until we reach a sign in the middle of this trail. The sign simply said private property, do not enter. I was sure this was the area John had mentioned. He ended up confirming it to me. I started thinking about all the noise from the other night, and I assumed the owner was the one walking around. But even then I started to think about it. If the owner was the one walking about, why didn't he say something? If he was trying to be nice and not wake us up, I wondered why he hadn't left us a note. Even though it seemed like this was a bad idea, we make our way over this barrier and continue down this road. We were unaware of what we would find. Remember, up to this point, John hadn't seen this area either. Something I'd noticed as we started reaching the end of the road was all this trash on the side of the trail. It seriously looked like people were living out here. When we arrive to the end of the road, we are met by a series of abandoned buildings and what looked to be a large garden. Honestly, this place looks like it's been abandoned for years. I was assuming these were homes, but they look like they've been unattended for years. It was once again at this moment that feeling of being watched had returned. I think John was feeling it too, but he just didn't want to admit it. With our curiosity getting the better of us, we now start walking around and seeing what we could find here. While inside one of these homes, we both heard the sounds of whispering. It was strange, but we managed to convince ourselves and say we were just hearing things. We make our way into what looked like a kitchen, and that's when I saw it. I saw what looked like somebody looking right at us through the hallway. I quickly turned around to see what looked like someone running. It was, of course, accompanied by the sounds of footsteps. Me and John both hear it, and we end up running back outside. Now that we're both outside looking back at the house, we're expecting to see somebody walk out, but nothing. Are you sure you saw somebody inside? Come on, I'm sure it was just your shadow or even mine. All right, genius, then explain the footsteps. I mean, come on, you were standing right next to me, weren't you? Well, maybe it was just some sort of animal. Come on, forget about it. We were able to calm ourselves down and talk ourselves out of what we had experienced. I wish we would have talked ourselves out of continuing to explore this area, but now we're heading over to the garden. I'm not sure how to describe it, but I'll try my best. You know those gardens you see in the movies that look like mazes? I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Either way, we make our way over there and we go see what it's all about. It doesn't take a genius to know that this was already a bad idea. We don't even stay in there for a minute, because all of a sudden we hear what clearly sounds like somebody screeching. The two of us froze as soon as we heard that. Seriously, what happens next seems to be straight out of a movie. We see as a group of people in dark clothing start making their way around the bend in front of us. My friend says hello to them for some reason, and in that moment, they start running after us. You know what happens next. We both take off running the way we had arrived. It's now us running away from these two who are yelling and screaming all these things at us. You'll never guess what happens next. Right before we make it to where we had gotten over the barrier, we can now see as another two people start making their way out of the trees. They look to be wearing the same dirty clothing as the other two we had encountered. Me and John jump over the barrier like we were in track and field, and we make our way down the trail. We arrive back to our car to see our tents completely destroyed. It seems that somebody had taken them out from the back of the bed and they ripped it up. We don't even question this. We jump right inside the car and we can see that group of 4 people approaching us. Thankfully, we were able to get out of there, but it was something we would never forget. Now, looking back on what happened, I wondered if the noises I had heard on the first night were one of the people we had seen. It could very well be possible, but I just don't like thinking about it. Number 5. This literally just happened a couple of days ago, and I wanted to go ahead and tell you all about it. I live out in the countryside where the largest town was at least an hour away from me. That's actually where I was working. So I live right by a set of woods where I go for my daily running. I was training for a half marathon at the time, and I used this trail to get my hours in. Now, normally I go running in the mornings right before I start work, but on this day I ended up going at nighttime. The reason I had gone in the evening was because I had to stay in my job and work double. It was right around the end of the year, and my boss wanted us to work as many hours as we could. It was a lot more work for me, but it did promise me more pay. Besides, I was saving up to buy a nice new pair of running shoes, since the ones I have are already old. The nice thing was right after work, I went to the shoe store to pick out the shoes I wanted. I arrived there right before they were about to close, literally 15 minutes before. I already knew what shoes I wanted, so I walked in, paid for them, and I left. When I got inside my car, I put them on, and I was so happy. Even though I was so tired from the long day at work, I wanted to get a couple of miles of running in. I make the hour drive back home, and I arrive at around 9:30 p.m. I didn't even bother going inside to put my things away. I closed my car and then did some stretching before beginning my running routine. Normally, I run about 5 miles. It's 2.5 miles until I reach a lake, then the other 2.5 to get back home. Since it was late, I figured I wouldn't go all the way out. As I was about a mile in, I had this weird feeling. While I was running, I felt like I'd seen somebody staring back at me through the trees. I told myself I was mistaking this for the lighting, and I ignored it. It was when I reached the halfway point when it ends up happening. This older-looking gentleman jumps out from behind the trees. He was yelling at me, saying I was making way too much noise. Alright, that was rude. I couldn't really see too many details because of his dark clothing he had on, but I would guess he was somewhere in his late 40s. He looked old and his clothing looked like he had seen better days. This really surprised me because I'd never seen anyone out here while running. My nearest neighbors were all the way on the other side of my house. This trail led into the wilderness, and I knew there were no homes out here. I apologized for making the noise and now started to make my way back. He had this strange smile when I said that, and I'll admit it really did get to me. While making my way back, I heard the sounds of running in the distance behind me. I ended up taking one look, and I could see the same person trying their best to keep up with me. I knew right away this was the same person. I was so happy I'd bought those new shoes. The older shoes were making it difficult for me to run. If I had those on instead, he most likely would have caught up to me. Finally, I can see my home in the distance, and I waste zero time getting inside. I made sure to check and see if all the doors and windows were closed, and thankfully they were. I now grabbed my phone and I called the neighbor that was down the road. The reason I didn't call for help was because it was at least 20 minutes away. The neighbors around here always looked after each other, so that was nice. Besides, I was more comfortable in calling my neighbor Kevin. He was seriously like an uncle to me. As I was explaining what was going on, I happened to take a look out the window through the curtain. I can see that same man, and he seems to be looking around my car. I'm crying at this point. I'm telling Kevin to get over here right now. I went to my room and I grabbed my baseball bat that I used for playing baseball. There, I waited for Kevin. By the time Kevin had arrived, this man was now gone. With Kevin there, we called officers and they checked out the surrounding woods. So far, nothing. I have no idea who he was and why he was out there to begin with. In the meantime, I'm staying at my Aunt Susie's house. If anything comes up, I'll make sure to let you all know. Well, hello there. Looks like you made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's story time. So tell me, which story was your favorite? Remember, if you have your own stories you'd like to submit, then make sure to send them. I would love to check them out. But other than that, I know it's the end of today's adventures, but worry not. Next time we'll return with even more. Until then, take care and have yourself an amazing day.